I read 3 alien romances and I want to talk about them.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soft spoken.
So, let me say that this may have some spoilers. I'm not going to spoil too much, but I need to be able to compare these, and spoilers are necessary. So, the 3 books I read was Ice Planet Barbarians. Now, with that, I've read through book 3, but I'm only going to talk about book 1. Choosing Theo, which I've only read book 1 in that series, and Artek, which I've only read book 1 in this series. All 3 are alien romances. If you're interested in alien romances, which one of these 3, if any, may be right for you? So let's start by giving brief discussion of what these books are. I'm going to start with Ice Planet Barbarians. It is the most well known. So in Ice Planet Barbarians, you have a group of women who have been abducted by aliens, by the bad aliens, and for reasons, the aliens have to drop their cargo on this ice planet. So these women are stuck on this ice planet. They find out that there is life on the planet, and it is these barbarians who have a fated mate system. And these humans start finding out that they are the fated mates to these barbarians. Okay, so they in this barbarian society, there's a very limited amount of women, and so these humans are very valuable for their reproduction. Um, so that's book 1 of Ice Planet Barbarians, and I ended up giving that one a 4-star. Choosing Theo. So Choosing Theo is about a girl who is also abducted by aliens. She escapes the aliens and ends up finding her way to the city of this alien planet and is like, help me, here's my situation, I need to get back to Earth. And they're all like, yeah, we're not taking you back to Earth because Earth doesn't know about aliens, but you can stay here and get married because our marriages last for 3 months. And then you have to stay on our planet for a year. And then after a year, you can go to another planet that's like an allowed planet, but you can't go back to Earth. So she's like, I need to get back to Earth. I'm going to find a way to do it, but then also I'm going to follow these rules that they have, and I'm going to go through their 3-month marriage ritual. So she's sent to this, I wouldn't say it's a bachelorette type thing. It kind of is, but not really, to choose which of the guys on this planet she would like to spend 3 months married to. 3 months married to. She chooses a guy named Theo, and he, in his world, is ugly. And so he's like, she can't possibly like me. She must be a spy who's been, because he's like a mercenary or something. She must be a spy who's been sent to kill me. And that's kind of the plot, how the plot starts in that one. This one, they live on a planet. They all just live together on a planet. Like aliens of different kinds have landed on this planet. And Artek is into the shop girl, the girl whose dad runs the general store. They have like a very 1800s vibe to them. And so he comes to the shop and he's like, "Hey, I'd like to get married." And she's like, "Okay, my life here isn't great. Let's do that." And she goes home with him. So, writing wise, oh, let me give you my ratings for each of them. So for Ice Planet Barbarians, book 1, I gave a 4-star. Choosing Theo, I gave a 4-star. And this one I gave a 3-star. Writing in general, I did not care for the writing in this book. I thought it really brought the book down, not necessarily the prose, but I felt like there was a lot of telling. I thought there was a lot of a lack of character development. It was I was really kind of disappointed in this because I wanted more to it. It had some really good ideas and some really fun things, but the writing really let it down. I enjoyed the writing of Ice Planet Barbarians, and I enjoyed the writing of Choosing Theo. Now, as far as do I have to suspend disbelief a lot? I would say this book has the least suspension of disbelief because everybody's on this planet. The relationship isn't too complicated. It's fine. So if you're looking for a book, an alien romance that makes sense, this one might be for you. It does make sense. Of all the books, it probably makes the most sense. He's been coming in and to this general store for a while. The girl, her father's been encouraging her to get married because he wants to get married, and the woman he wants to marry doesn't want his daughter living with them. And she's grown, I mean, but she's been running their store together. This guy, he and his brothers, they're military, so it's that kind of brotherhood, not like biological brothers, which is cool because like they all look a lot different. And if I was going to continue in this series, I think it would have given me a lot of interesting alien bodies to explore. Like, what is everybody's makeup and characters? Um, however, um, this book doesn't have a whole lot of plot, which I think is why it's the most believable. It's just she goes and is like, "Oh, I have to do dishes for 7 dudes. This kind of sucks." He's living on a farm with his 7 brothers. I don't know if I explained that. And she's like, "Oh, now I've got to do dishes for all these guys. Well, now you're going to help me do dishes." I mean, like that's the plot. But it's the most believable plot of all of these. Ice Planet Barbarians. It was, I mean, moderately believable. I guess we could believe that aliens are being dumped on this planet. We understand why things are going on, but there's some things that we don't have a lot of explanation for, at least in book one. It's a long series, so maybe. But I would say Ice Planet Barbarians is the second most believable. And then Choosing Theo. This world doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things that just aren't believable, don't make sense, so I'm going to say least believable. Now, as far as characters, in this book, the characters aren't really very well developed. They're very surface level, in my opinion. And so I didn't really care about them. I couldn't tell you very much about them. In Ice Planet Barbarians, I think there is a good bit of development with the main character. Her name's Georgie, and a little bit with Vectal, who's the guy. Vectal is the chief, and so he's interested in taking care of his people. And most of what we get, though, is like Georgie being strong, coming to terms with what's happened to her, things like that. I really liked Georgie and Vectal as a couple, and I thought they were pretty well developed. Theo and Jade, I have mixed feelings about. I liked a lot of things about Theo and his character, but he was a little bit too alpha for me. He was very aggressive, and he wasn't always very in control of himself, which I wasn't a fan of. Jade is too dumb to live in certain situations. Like, there's just times I'm like, girl, stop. So I would say that these characters in Artek had the least personality, but the ones that had personality, I didn't think that Theo and Jade were a very good. Uh, they had issues. They had issues to following them. All right. So next question: How's this? Well, how's the spice? Let's go. How's the spice, and then we'll do consent. But how's the spice? Of all these 3 books, I would say this one had the least spice. It's a fairly short book, though. It had the least spice. It did have some spice, and a lot of the spice was kind of similar. Like, if you read all these 3 books, there's certain things that they're all doing, or mostly all doing. And so that was kind of weird because I was like, oh, I read a lot of romance, and I haven't seen this particular thing as much another romance, and all three of these have it. So there does seem there's a vibe, a little bit of like similarities, and I don't know if it's a genre thing or a copying the book that came first. I don't know which book that is, but um, this one probably had the least spice. So if you're looking for something that had the least spice, this is it. I think there was like 3 or 4 scenes. It's not particularly, in my opinion, good spice. Whereas I think the other 2 books had, well, we'll get there. This book, the spice isn't super, it isn't, it's detailed, but it's not detailed and long and drawn out. It's like this book, a lot of things are just kind of summarized. And I felt like we didn't really get into the spice scenes the way we do the other books. So I think that this is the least spicy of the 3, but that the spice also wasn't very good. Ice Planet Barbarian. Not as, it's kind of moderate spice level, like not as much spice as I was expecting, to be honest. And I'm not sure which of these books was actually more spicy. I know content of the spice, the Theo book had a lot more stuff I wasn't comfortable with than Ice Planet Barbarian. So Ice Planet Barbarian for book 1 was moderate spice level. We have quite a few scenes. Everybody is having a good time, and I wasn't offended by anything. I was having a good time. Choosing Theo, there's a good bit of spice. There's some very aggressive things in this book spice-wise, and I am not into that. Like, it got very aggressive, and like, we are reminded that the things happening are consensual. And that's a good reminder, because there are times where it's like, oh man, if she wasn't digging this, this would be like awful. So, like, I would say my best spice experience was Ice Planet Barbarians. And if you are looking for like more aggressive, darker spice, Choosing Theo is probably for you. If you are looking to like dip your toe into the genre and don't want an excessive amount of the spice, this is probably more in line with you. All right, so let's get on to consent. Each of these books have a little bit of a consent issue. None of them have so much consent issue that I was bothered. And let me be clear, like, I read a lot of like older romances, historical romance, where there is a lack of consent, just flat out a lack of consent, and then, they kiss and make up and it's fine. That was not the case in any of these books. But each of them have a little bit of a consent issue. So slight spoilers possibly. Yeah, let's say slight spoilers for this one. I don't think it's a huge spoiler, but in this book, the characters have been together, they are married, and she wakes up in the morning and decides to play south of his border. And he's not upset about this or offended by this. He's always been the giver, and like, she's purposely knows that he's not wanting her to do this, but she does it anyway, and he likes it, and it's fine. To me, that's not a huge consent issue because they've been together, but obviously, like, he didn't consent to that, but he's not like, oh my God, get off of me, or anything like that. Like, so depending on how your consent issues are, I would say maybe this has the, well, yeah, this has the least consent issues, probably, if you take into account that they are a couple. Okay, maybe not. I didn't think the consent issues in this were a big deal. They are a couple, they've been married, they've been intimate, and he's just, sleeping. His partner, spouse, rolls over, starts messing with him. If that is a consent issue to you, then so be it. It was not bothersome to me. Ice Planet Barbarians. In Vectol's culture, when they are fated mates, that is basically like breeding time. And he starts messing with Georgie before he can even communicate with her and before she knows what's going on. Now, as soon as she tells him to stop it, he's really good about that. He's like, "Oh, well, hands off. Okay. No, no problem. No problem, friend. Nature was calling. I thought your nature was calling because this is what we do. But if you're not feeling it, absolutely." So I think there is a lack of consent in that, but like consent per their social norms. So per our social norms, you'd like to ask permission to mess with people. But in his society, when your fated mate stuff is happening, it's a very specific thing that triggers the fated mate. So like if his fated mate thing's going off in his society, you get down and dirty because that's what you do. Um, so there is a little bit of consent, but like I said, as soon as she's like, "No, no, friend," he's like, "Oh, okay, friend. Well, backing up." So while you have a little bit of initial consent issue of it is not like anybody's violating people's consents on purpose. In this book, like she knows he wouldn't want that and she does it anyway. So I guess in a way that's more problematic. Vectel just doesn't know it's an issue and he stops as soon as she says so. The thing is that is different for me is like in this character, these or in this book, these two characters have been together, are intimate. And so while in her in her mind it's just, he would never let me do this, not because he doesn't want it, but because, he wants to be he needs to be in control and he doesn't want to he wants to please me and not me please him for reasons and so like consent it's a different thing whereas Vectal has never met Georgie in his life but he's following the cultural norms for consent like his fated mate bell ringing is basically like typically with his own species is a sign of consent. That's what you do. So those are yeah. Choosing Theo. So a lot of stuff that happens early on is not consented to, but it's not spicy, but it's things like he's like, "Wow, in our culture, you have to take a bath with me." And so like that kind of thing is a consent issue. Once they get into intimate things, she gives him a very broad consent, which is as long as I don't say no, you can do whatever you want, which is a good thing because it gets kind of aggressive and crazy. And like that stipulation of we know it's all consensual was very helpful, even though I was going, I'm not really comfortable with this. What's happening? But we know she's fine with it. There is a place later in the book where she does tell him to stop and he doesn't immediately stop and she has to tell him again. She's like, "I told you if I say stop, you have to stop." And then he's like, all right, don't like it, but I'll do it. So that's kind of where consent is in each of these books. All of them have a consent issue. I don't know what's the most serious. None of the consent issues bothered me. They might bother you. And the spicy stuff, the only one that I really had an issue with content wise was Choosing Theo. Yeah. Um, Again though, like this is the book that I liked the least of the three of them. I didn't think it was very well. I it's a novella. It's not there's not much to it. It's very, in my opinion, underwritten. It was fine. The characters were interesting, they just weren't developed. The plot was fine. It just there wasn't much of it. The side characters were interesting-ish. I will not be continuing in the series, although like I wish I could have if the writing had been more to what I wanted, I would have definitely continued because some of the side characters were kind of interesting. They just weren't very well developed. But had this been like a more developed book, I definitely would have continued. Ice Planet Barbarians, I gave a 4 star. I hated the beginning of this book so much I almost DNF'd it. However, once we get into the Georgie Vectal stuff, I love it, and everything like from the time she meets Vectal to the end of the book could have been a 5 star if we had cut out the beginning. The beginning was so traumatic, so crazy. In the beginning of Ice Planet Barbarians, Georgie is witness to an essay, and for me, that was very triggering the way it was done. A couple things that happened involving the essay really later in the book also bothered me. And so like that book, I almost DNF'd, but overall, once we got to the romance, I had a good time. I've continued in the series and love everything after it. So if that is going to bother you at the beginning, maybe skip to book 2. The essay thing in book 1 just really, really was a problem for me, like such a problem. So, and I guess I should have mentioned that in the consent thing because I'm thinking consent between characters, but Georgie witnesses a non-con act on the ship with the bad aliens, and it's really icky. So that could be a trigger as well for you if consent, but like I was looking at couple consent not throughout the whole book. Choosing Theo. I had a really good time with a lot of this book. Theo's aggression bothered me in places. I loved the humor. I thought the beginning of this book was so good. I remember messaging a friend at the 25% mark and being like, this book might be the best alien romance I've read. And then like things went downhill from there. But beginning wise, I loved Choosing Theo the best. I really had a good time with the concept and his idea of being like, that he's kind of gruff and angry with her in the beginning because he thinks she's trying to hurt him because he is ugly on their planet and she couldn't possibly have chosen him because no woman has ever chosen him before as a husband, and why would anybody choose him? And like he's adorable in the mistakes he's making. Like there's literally a scene, and I was messaging everybody I know about it because it is the funniest, cutest scene ever. Theo is all like, I'm going to make her show that she is an assassin who's out to get me or steal my secrets or something. I'm going to make her life absolutely not worth living here. I am going to get her a puppy. Like, legit, that's the scene. Because in their world, women don't like dogs, and we find out why. And it's stupid. It's along that world building plot thing that I was like, this is a really dumb world. But anyway, so he is like, yeah, this'll get her. I'm gonna bring in a puppy and tell her she has to hang out with the puppy. And it is the cutest little thing because, of course, the girl's a human girl and she likes puppies. So she's like, oh, puppy. And he's like, it's slobbering on you, it's licking you. You are not supposed to like this. And she's like, puppy. Like, legit scene. And it was so good. But like I said, I really had a hard time because the Choosing Theo, I thought was going to be like 5-star, way better than book 1 of Ice Planet Barbarians. And then we got further in. And then things took a turn. So it's the beginning of these 3 books. Which did I like best? Finding Theo or Choosing Theo. Loved the beginning. Loved to probably around, I don't even know which percent, like a good fourth of the book. Because, the finding scene was interesting. Her getting to the planet was interesting. But the things for me that made it not great were he's sometimes he's a real sweet, caring guy, and sometimes he's aggressive and awful and scary. And like we kind of get an explanation for why, but I just can't handle when the guys are like that. And I think he's supposed to be like a grumpy character, but he takes grumpy to a level I was uncomfortable with. And he does have very adorable moments where he's sweet. There's an instance where like he breaks a cup on accident because she walks in and she's not wearing very much clothes, and he's kind of like forgets his own strength, and then he's all like worried about her. Did he get glass on her? And so he's like checking her little feet for, he's like picked her up and put her on the counter and, oh, are you okay? Do you have any glass on your feet? So like in those moments I loved Theo. But then the alpha aggressive possessive stuff that happens later was too much for me to enjoy. Like I no longer liked Theo very much by the end of the book, and I was like, went from okay, I could date this guy to red flag. Artek, like I said, wasn't very developed. Didn't have an issue with him, but the start of the book was okay. It was reasonable. didn't really do anything for me, didn't drag me in. And of all these 3 books, the one I least liked the beginning to was Ice Planet Barbarians, because that essay scene was just so freaking much. So freaking much. So, yeah, I am going to be continuing on Ice Planet Barbarians. I'm on book 3. And I don't think I'm going to be continuing these 2 series. I don't think the next book for Theo's thing has the aggression in it, which was a big issue for me, but also the world building was really weird, and I kind of read through some of the comments and the reviews just to make sure some of the aggressive stuff that I was not comfortable with wasn't happening in book 2. And after reading like the comments on book 2, I don't think I want to continue in the Choosing Theo series. And without reading any kind of comments, I can tell you I don't want to continue in this series because the writing wasn't working for me. So I'm just now getting into aliens. These were my thoughts on these 3 alien romance books. Tell me what alien romance books you loved. Consent is important to me, so I really prefer books that have consent. Now, again, the 3 situations I mentioned don't particularly bother me, but like it needs to be consent pretty early on. Like if the heroine's like, "Hey, stop," he can't be continuing on. I'm not looking for dark romance. I'm not looking for aggression. I'm not looking for anything that is super aggressive. I'm not into choking and spanking and anything like that. Please don't suggest anything with that. So consent, nice. I prefer guys who are cinnamon buns taking care of the heroine. Like I love in Ice Planet Barbarians how the guys are all like, their biggest focus is my mate has food, my mate is warm, my mate is safe, and like that very caregiving stuff. And Theo's kind of like that a little bit at times. I love when he's like that, but then he gets crazy, but I want that. So I love the aliens who are like, I'm gonna take care of you. I love the breeding thing. I love the we don't have enough women and we need humans to breed with. That was not in this book, but it was in these other 2. In Finding Theo or Choosing Theo, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's really didn't work for me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I thought it was kind of dumb. The way the world set up and the trope with the breeding. Loved it in Ice Planet Barbarians. Would read more of Mars needs women to have babies, basically, I think is what the trope's called. So leave me your comments below for good alien romance, and I will see what I can check out. Of these, I would most recommend Ice Planet Barbarians. Loving that series. If the essay thing is going to bother you in book 1, start at book 2. There is like not an info dump, but a situation where they explain kind of everything you need to know in book 2 at the beginning so that you can continue on in the series knowing what's going on. I loved the later stuff in the book, but that essay scene in book 1 just was too much for me in Ice Planet Barbarians. If you don't mind a lot of aggression, like consensual aggression, but aggression, and a heroine who should be dead because she's too dumb to live, Finding Theo might be for you. I really enjoyed it a lot, despite the things that didn't work for me. Like, the aggression was too much, and her making bad choices really bothered me, but overall, I really enjoyed it. And this, if you don't mind stuff that's kind of underwritten, if you don't want the really, really spicy stuff, I mean, there's spice, but it's not a lot of spice, this one might work for you. Didn't work for me. Leave me comments below, and I'll see you next time. This has been Jane. Bye.